We have to take a look at the mysteries of life and death. And certainly it is a subject that we are not really fond to talk about, right? I mean, who wants to die? I bet you don't want your family members to die, your friends, you don't want to lose your loved one. Nor you want your cat or your dog, your pet, to die. And we can see that when those events happen in people's lives, people commit suicide, others cry a lot, some find it really hard to move on after such a tragic event. But it is important for us to understand and to comprehend what death really is. Because being afraid of death isn't going to solve the problem. Eventually, whether I want it or not, I will see myself face to face with the moment when I have to die. And I will also see myself with a moment where I will lose someone, a relative, a friend, a loved one, everything. Everybody and everything in this universe is ruled by life and death. Even stars. Sometimes a star shines through millions and millions of years, and then eventually it becomes a black hole, it becomes a dead star. There is no way we're going to escape or avoid the process of dying, because it is part of life. And in reality, when we use reflection and self-knowledge, we can actually see that death is the first step towards the awakening. Because when you lose someone, then and only then you realize how valuable that someone was to you. Or when you are about to die, when you are close to die, either through a disease, through some kind of problem, in that very moment you realize that maybe you wasted so many days, so many years of your life, and that you haven't really started to live. So in a way, although we don't want to die, and although we find it like really bad, but it's part of life. And death is one of the best things that can happen to us if we know how to use reflection and our consciousness to take advantage from such an event. Death in itself is very mysterious, and so to analyze it and to comprehend it is fundamental if we want to know ourselves and eventually to wake up. It is also said that if we are afraid of dying, then we cannot die psychologically. And that is one of the things that we want to achieve in our lives. It's one of the 3 factors of the consciousness revolution: to die in our defects, in our flaws. And if we are not willing to die physically, then it is said that there's no way we can die psychologically. So let us begin by talking about what death really is. If we take a look at the angel of death, its aspect is very symbolic. First of all, the appearance that the angels of death have is merely a uniform. In the same way that a police officer, a soldier, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, an employee at a supermarket, a businessman, a lawyer, a judge, all of those people wear a uniform that identifies their profession. And so in the same way, the angels of death, they are covered or wear the uniform that represents death. We can clearly see the scythe, this tool. Now they use this tool in order to cut the antakarana or silver cord that unites our physical body with our internal bodies. But the scythe in itself is very symbolic, because I have to ask, why a scythe? Maybe they could use a pair of scissors, a sword, or a knife. Why a scythe? Well, the farmer uses a scythe when it's harvest time, and so cuts the plants and then separates the seeds from the physical body of the plant. And the physical body is then used to feed cattle. And only the seeds is what the farmer is interested on. Good seeds will produce a good harvest. So in the same way, we can compare our lives to that of a tree or a plant. When we come to this world, we grow, we flourish, and eventually we give a a fruit. Our lives synthesize or are reduced at the moment when we die to the things that we leave behind, to the things that we did that really mattered, both good and bad. So in its essence, the sight invites us all to reflect on what would happen if the angel of death were to come today for us. Are we leaving a legacy behind for humanity? Or on the contrary, we were a bad friend, a bad husband, we had an affair, we were cruel, we were selfish, or were we charitable?
Each angel of death carries a book. In this book are the names of the souls who must depart from the flesh. No one dies a day before his appointed time. The angel of death simply removes the soul from the body.
If we were able to accept the good things in life, we also have to understand the need to accept that there are processes in life that are not really pleasant. This does not mean that we are going to give up. No, we always have to fight for life. We are not going to live forever, and we have to be ready to face that moment where we will die, or where we might have to see someone we love die. And it is fundamental for us to free ourselves from fear of dying.
It is urgent to understand in depth and in all the regions of the mind what death in itself really is. It is only in this way that it is possible to understand fully what immortality is.
Now, the angels of death are also sometimes accompanied by a series of animals that represent death. If we take a look at those animals, they represent death itself. It is not that they are bad, they just fulfill a purpose, and it is related with death. Now, what happens after the physical process of dying? Well, the physical body is left here, and the soul, the essence, goes on to follow its journey. But sometimes it so happens that there is a ghost roaming around in the house where that person used to live, maybe even near the tombstone in the cemetery. Well, a ghost is just an entity that is the leftover of that person who died. So when we die, our real being goes on its journey to a new life, maybe somewhere. The personality is left here along with the physical body and the vital body. Most of us do not realize when we die. That is why the personality continues to roam around in those places where that person used to live, because that person lived its whole life asleep. Therefore, his personality is left over wandering. We need to understand that the personality is not the man or the woman who died, because the being, the real self, is gone. The personality is just a memory. So maybe that person now has a new physical expression. So the attachment that we might have with one another, in the end it matters not, because our being might have a different plan for us. Attachment is a big problem when it comes to waking up as well. That is why sometimes a personality might be seen roaming around in a haunted house or cemetery, or even in the park itself. And since we do not pay attention, we do not realize that actually that particular person has actually died last week or last month maybe. There is nothing to fear when it comes down to the personality of a dead person. If it were to happen to us that in our home there is the personality of a dead person, all we have to do is a small prayer, and it can help as well to light a candle or simply turning on an incense stick. That should be enough to rid the environment or the ambience of those energies. And another aspect for us to keep in mind about the process of dying is that when we die, we take like an impression of our very last moments, and that impression is sort of imprinted on the new physical body that we will have. So this is to say that if we died with hunger, if we were really hungry when we died, maybe we starved to death, then in our next life we will be born with that sense of feeling hunger. So in a way, this life, the way it ends, it is somewhat connected to the way our next life will begin.
The path of life is formed with the tracks of the hooves of the horse of death.
Now, when do we actually die? When can we say that we have died as a fact? Esoteric wisdom teaches us that sometimes the person didn't really die, but rather enter into a state that is known as catalepsis, which basically means that the physical body is dead, but it can still be reanimated, even after 48 hours. In fact, the limit is 72 hours, 3 days. After we died, if 72 hours have passed, there's no way we will be reanimated or come back to our physical body. But there are many examples of people who were buried, but eventually, when years later an autopsy was conducted, people were able to see scratches on the inside of the coffin. That is because that person had died, but the Antakarana, this silver cord, was not yet completely cut. So that is why in ancient times it was recommended to make a funeral that would last for 3 days, a minimum of 72 hours. So they could be certain that that person had died and that wouldn't wake up. It is certainly a mystery that happens more often than we think it does, because, to be honest, how many times the authorities conduct an autopsy or open the coffin to see those scratches? See? So, of course, if someone died in a car crash, committed suicide, or received a bullet wound to the head or heart, yes, in that case there's no way he or she is going to be reanimated. Or if the physical body begins to inflate with gases, of course it automatically sort of entered into the process of decomposition. But sometimes when there's a heart attack or when death happens all of a sudden by natural causes, that person can be reanimated by means that are inexplicable to science. Certainly, the scientific community does not know about the spiritual realm and the mysteries.
Death in itself is not terrifying. It is something lovely, sublime, ineffable. But the mind bottled up in the known only moves inside the vicious cycle that goes from credulity to skepticism.
So when we die, there is what is called a retrospection. There is a process where we see our life go in front of us, every single event, like a movie that fast forwards in front of us. That is to help us to revalue our life and to understand what we're going to be judged for. And then, after that, there is a slow retrospection. We have to remember that time is relative. So when we die, time goes extremely slowly. When we have that first retrospection, we can still come back because that fast retrospection happens within those first 72 hours. So if we are sent back, that quick retrospection serves us to revalue what we're doing with our life. Sometimes people have drowned and were underwater for 20, 30 minutes and then they emerge alive. How is that even possible? It is not, yet it happens. So we die when we are meant to die. Unless, of course, there's an accident or some event take place that we take our own life. But otherwise, we die when we have to die. We don't die by chance, basically.
Any poet can write beautiful books on love, but it is impossible to communicate the truth about love to people who have never experienced it. In a similar way, we say that it is impossible to communicate the truth about death to people who have not lived it.
So, to be alive is a blessing, and we need to take advantage of every single day that we have to leave a legacy, to leave something for future generations, and for ourselves as well, to wake up and to eliminate the ego, so that our lives are not in vain. How we die and when we die is not what matters. That is irrelevant. What matters is that when death comes to us, we are ready to face it. So, this is the question you have to take with this conference today. Are you ready to leave this realm? Are you ready to go? I believe the answer is no. We are not. because we're just starting to work on ourselves spiritually, right? But while we are alive, there is hope, there is a chance, and not everybody has that. So you are very special because you're watching this video and because you made it this far into the course. You are very special because you want to wake up, you want to understand about the mysteries of life and death, about the awakening. Do not despair about your age or your conditions. No, that is irrelevant. What is not irrelevant and what is of utmost importance is for us to begin today and to not waste a single moment of our lives doing things that are meaningless, pointless, and that take us nowhere.
There is fear towards death because of ignorance. We always fear what we do not know. Yet when the consciousness awakens, ignorance disappears. Then fear towards the unknown ceases to be.
I hope this lesson served you to understand the process of dying and to stop being afraid of death.
Truth is the unknown from moment to moment. The truth about death cannot be an exception.
Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.